Hey guys, welcome to C# Programming for Beginners. In this video, I'm going to give you an introduction to the C# programming language and the .NET framework. This is actually the first C# video on my channel. I've been working with it recently, and I really want to start working in videos and projects using C# and .NET. So this video is definitely going to be geared towards beginners. If you've never used C# before, that's fine, you're in the right place. If you have any experience at all with object-oriented programming on any level, then you should be able to keep up with this video just fine. And then if you've never actually typed a line of code in your life, you'll still take stuff away from this, but of course I would suggest that you look at other resources as well. Alright, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time job in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Alright, so initially I was going to do a crash course and go through things like all the different data types and how to create functions and all that, really not building an actual application. Similar to Derek Banner's tutorial on YouTube, which is awesome, and I would definitely suggest checking that out as well. But instead I chose to start from scratch, and we're going to install Visual Studio, set up a project, and we're going to build a really simple Windows console application. Okay, so many of these videos like this, they'll do like a simple hello world where they'll just print text out onto the screen. And I want to go more in depth than that. So we're going to build a console program that will generate a random number and then let us guess it. And we're going to add logic. We're going to make sure that the input the user types is actually a number. We're going to be creating custom functions. We'll look at code organization, loops, conditionals, variables, all that stuff. Alright, so it is kind of like a crash course, but structured in a way that we're actually building a simple application. Alright, so what I'm going to do before we actually jump in and install Visual Studio and get going, I just want to talk about some of the main points of C# and .NET, just for people that are completely new to it. So what exactly is C#? It's a general purpose object-oriented programming language. Now I know a lot of you guys are web developers and may be new to languages like C# and Java, but even if you know PHP or JavaScript, Python, any of these other languages that work with objects and classes, you're going to see a lot of similarities, and you should be able to pick this stuff up really quick. Alright, once you get to a certain point, it's really easy to learn new languages because they all have the same general fundamentals. Alright, so C# was created by Microsoft, and it's one of the languages of the .NET framework, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, as far as difficulty, C# is relatively easy to learn in my opinion. I think it's easier to learn than something like Java, but some people do disagree with that. I also think it's a great first language. It really encompasses all the things that you need to know for learning common principles in programming. And it really prepares you to work with other languages as well. So if you want to learn how to create Windows applications, C# is a great choice. It can be used to create applications on other platforms as well, but you may need to use some extra tools such as Mono, which you can check out. I think it's the monoproject.net. Java is probably a better choice for building applications on other platforms, but C# is definitely the choice for Windows. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about .NET and what that is, okay, because it really confuses some people between C# and .NET. It's kind of a blanket term, but generally when you talk about .NET, you're talking about the framework, okay? It's technically a framework and a runtime that runs primarily on Windows. Like I said, there's other tools you can use like Mono, which allow you to create applications for other platforms like Linux and so on. But for the most part, you're going to be dealing with Windows with C#. Now, C# is not technically, it doesn't technically require the .NET framework in simple terms. If you want to do anything meaningful, though, you will need it. You can kind of think of it as C# as the airplane and then .NET as the runway. You can technically use the airplane without the runway, but you're most likely going to use the runway in all situations to get your plane up off the ground. Alright, unless you just want to blindly drive a plane into the woods. So C# is not the only .NET language. There's a bunch, including Visual Basic, .NET, C++/CLI, which is a certain version of C++. It includes extensions for CLR objects, and I'll go over CLR in a second. There's also F#, there's COBOL, there's a lot of them, and you can look those up. Just Google .NET languages and you'll find them all. All right, and .NET is generally made up of two main components, which is the CLR and the class library, also called FCL, or Framework Class Library. And that gives us a ton of reusable classes, interfaces, value types, and much more. All right, so it's basically the foundation of the .NET framework. So what is CLR? And don't worry about it. If this stuff confuses you, this isn't stuff that you really need to know and master in order to start learning C#. All right, but I do want to just go over it because I don't think it would be fair for me not to say anything about it and jump right into the syntax. So CLR stands for Common Language Runtime, and this is the virtual machine component of the .NET framework. Okay, it manages the execution of programs. It's similar to the Java runtime. It provides an environment for our applications to run. All right, so it has a process called JIT, J-I-T, or just in time, and it converts your compiled code into machine instructions that your computer understands. Okay, it also provides services like memory management, type safety, garbage collection. If you're a web developer, then you're going to be new to this kind of stuff, compiling your software. And I think that you're going to find it really awesome when you start messing with system resources and you get to use some of the stuff that's in the class library. All right, so you can interact with, the hardware on your machine, which is really cool. And it's much different than working with just, web development on a server. So CLR also lets you use components that were built in other languages, which is really nice. All .NET programs are executed by the CLR. Okay, whether it's F# or whatever else it may be. Now, don't worry. Like I said, don't worry if this stuff confuses you. You don't need to master it to write C# code, especially for what we're going to be doing in this video. I just wanted you to be somewhat familiar with these terms and what goes on behind the scenes. Okay, so this is the type of stuff that books are really useful for. They drill that into your head. But what I want to do in this video is just get you started with the syntax and structure of building a C# program. All right, so I believe this is the last slide. We're going to need a tool to write our code, obviously, and also compile it. And for that, we're going to use an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. As I said earlier, I know most of you guys are web developers, and you probably know what an IDE is, even though you don't really need it for most web development. Okay, so for when we're coding JavaScript or PHP, something like that, we can use our standard code editors like Sublime, Atom, and even Visual Studio Code, which kind of has a feel like Visual Studio just without the extra tools. All right, so an IDE is kind of like a text editor on steroids. It has compiling and build tools, extensive debugging, IntelliSense, and much more. All right, and there's a few different versions of Visual Studio. We're going to use the community version, which is absolutely free. The professional and the enterprise edition is not free. It's actually very, very expensive. If you were working for a corporation building apps and stuff, you would most likely use that. All right, guys, so like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this stuff just talking about C# and .NET. I want to jump right in and get our feet wet. So let's go ahead and we'll install Visual Studio, and then we'll get started on our simple application. All right, guys, so we're going to start on our application. First thing we're going to do is install Visual Studio. Visual Studio is the IDE that we're going to use to create C# and .NET applications. So this is visualstudio.com, and like I said before, there's a few different versions. So we're going to go into Downloads, and you'll see that first we have the Community Edition here, and that's what we'll be using. It's fully featured, it's completely free, and it's for individual developers. So then you have the Professional version, which offers extra subscription benefits for small teams, and then Enterprise is an end-to-end solution for larger scale corporations and things like that. And then Visual Studio Code, which is just the text editor, which you've probably seen me use quite a few times. It's similar to something like Sublime Text or Atom or WebStorm, something like that. So we're going to grab the Community Edition right here. So let's click the free download button. Just close that out, and that should download. Okay, let's go ahead and open that up. Okay, so we're going to get this pop up here. We're just going to say continue. And remember, this is a large program, so some of the installation may take quite a bit of time. So you may see me kind of like, pause if something's taking too long, so we don't sit here in awkward silence. All right, so now you're going to get a screen like this, and this is basically allowing you to set up different types of environments. So up here we have Windows, we have Universal Windows Platform Development using C# or VB, JavaScript. And then over here we have .NET Desktop Development. That's what we want to choose. All right, but just to look at some of the other ones here, we have Desktop Development with C++. We have Web and Cloud Development, so ASP.NET, Python. If you're deploying to Azure, Node.js. If we go down here, you have Mobile and Gaming. We have Xamarin, all types of gaming development, C++, and then we have other tool sets, Linux development for C++. So there's a lot that you can do, and it can get very complicated, but try not to get overwhelmed with stuff like this because we're only using a certain part of this IDE. So let's go ahead and make sure that that's checked, and we'll click install. All right, and this could take a little bit depending on your system and how powerful it is. So we're going to go ahead and pause this, and when this is done, I'll be back. All right, guys, so the installation is complete, and unfortunately, I'm getting a reboot required message here. I'm not sure why. I don't think I've ever had this before. So if you have it, just go ahead and reboot. I'm going to have to restart, so I will be back after that. All right, guys, so I am back. I just rebooted or re-logged in, whatever, and I started up Visual Studio, and we get a screen like this. So this is going to ask if you want to sign in using your Azure credits. We're going to go ahead and skip this and say, not now, maybe later. And you can choose a theme. I prefer to like dark code editors over the light, so I'm going to choose dark, but of course, feel free to use one of the other ones. And then we're going to say Start Visual Studio. All right, and that should go ahead and open up. It's opening up on a different screen. Let me just pull it down, maximize this. So this is the start page or the start screen. And try not to let this overwhelm you. There is a ton of stuff up here, a ton of options. There's these icons. You have these different panes on the right and left. So don't get overwhelmed by that stuff. We are not going to need most of it. So this is just the start page. Gives us some help, some documentation. We're going to go ahead and just close that up. And then what we want to do is go to New Project. And then you're going to get a bunch of different options here because we can build desktop applications. We can build console applications, which is what we want. So make sure that you have Visual C# highlighted over here. And then we're going to go and we're going to build a console app with the .NET framework. Okay, and down here we can name our application. So I'm just going to call this, I'm going to call it Number Guesser. All right, and then the default location is going to be in your, mine is actually in my Dropbox documents because that's set to my main documents, but if yours isn't, it'll just go right in your regular documents, and then a folder called Visual Studio 2017, and then a folder called Projects. All right, now I'm also going to uncheck this Create Directory for Solution because I want to have everything in one directory. I don't want it separate. All right, and then we're going to just click OK. And that's going to open up our project inside of the IDE. All right, so every C# project you create is going to look like this by default. And let me make this a lot bigger so you guys can see what's going on here. So we start with one main file with one main class, and it's called Program. And if you look over here in the Solution Explorer, and we look under program.cs, that's our actual program, okay? That's the actual, this file that we're looking at here, program.cs. All right, and then this other stuff here, right now we don't really have to worry about this. It gives us some properties. If we look at this assembly info.cs file, this is kind of a configuration. You have the title, the description, the year, all that kinds of stuff. And if we look in app.config, that's an XML config file, and we're not going to really deal with that, but just know that it is there. Okay, and then let's go ahead and look at the main file. So we'll start with a namespace. A namespace is basically like a container for classes and functions. So in the event that you have two classes called the same thing or two functions, you can reference the namespace so you know exactly what's going on, and your program doesn't get confused. So by default, the namespace is going to be whatever you called the application, but of course you could change it if you want. Now up here we have these using statements, using system collections generic. These are basically bringing in other namespaces with other functions and other things that we can use inside of this program, all right, or inside of this namespace. So the only one we're actually going to need here is system. So I'm going to get rid of these other ones here. We don't want to have code that is doing nothing for us, just to keep things simple. All right, because we're going to be using, for instance, the console class, which comes from system. So inside our namespace, our number guesser namespace, we have a class, and a class is used to create objects from. Okay, whenever you're working with object-oriented programming, you're working with classes. In this case, it's called program by default. And inside classes, we can have functions and we can have variables, also called methods and properties. All right, so whenever you hear the word method, it basically just refers to a function inside of a class. So let's add some comments here. So this is the namespace. This is going to be our main class, and then this is going to be basically the entry point for our application. Okay, so we'll say entry point method. Sorry about that. And actually, before we get into that, let's talk about static and void. So void is going to be the return type of this particular method or this function. Basically, that means that there isn't going to be one. It's not going to return anything. Now, you can have functions or methods. You can have them return things if it's a string or an integer. Or you would put that here, but in this case, we're not going to have any return value. And then static is a little tough to explain to someone that's new to object-oriented programming. But basically, when we create a class, we can instantiate objects from that, and we can create multiple instances of that object using that class. Well, when we use static, we don't have instances. We're referring to the class itself, or the function itself. All right, so that's what static means. And then in here is where we can start our code. So let's just say start here. All right, now I'm going to start by just outputting some text. Now, like I said, we're using this system namespace here, which comes with a whole bunch of stuff we can use. So there's actually something called console. Jesus, I can't type. So console, and you'll see we get this nice little IntelliSense drop down that tells us all different information about each kind of library or class or object. So it says represents the standard input, output, and error streams for console applications. Now, if I go console dot, you'll see that we get another drop down, and these are all different functions and properties of this console. So we have background color, we have clear, cursor left, cursor right, all these different things. The method that we want is actually write line. So if we go down here at the very bottom, you'll see write line. Okay, of course you can just type it in, but you can also select it. And then that is actually a function. So you want to put your parentheses. And then in here, we want to output a string. We're just going to put some double quotes in here. And let's just say hello world. Now I'm going to save it with Control S, and then if we want to run this program, it's very simple. All we have to do is do a Control F5. Now my console actually opens on another monitor, and that's how I want it when I develop. Unfortunately, I would rather it open on this monitor just for this video, but I don't know how to do that. I've never had to do that, so I'm just going to have to drag it down when I open it. But anyways, you can see that it's outputting the text hello world. Okay, so if we look down here, console write line is going to write that line. Now, if we just did console write, which is another function that we can use, let's save that and run it. And then if I drag that down, you'll see it prints out hello world, but the next line is going to be, it's not going to be a next line, it's going to be on that same line. Okay, so that's the main difference between write line and write. In most cases, you're going to use write line. Now, as far as variables go, C# is a typed language, meaning that we need to define the types of data that's going to go into a variable. For instance, if we want a variable called name, we can't just do name and set that equal to, actually we want to use double quotes, and set that equal to something here. You'll see we have an error, and if we look at that, if I hover over it, it says the name does not exist in the current context. So what we need to do is we need to mark this as a string, because that's what it is. Okay, any string in between quotes, it's going to have basically any character you want is going to be a string. Now we have this green squiggly line, which is basically kind of like a warning or a notification, or just like a heads up, and it's telling us that the variable name is assigned, but its value is never used because we assigned it, but we're not using it anywhere. So it's kind of giving us a heads up saying, do you really need this? All right, and if we go down here, let's replace hello world with name, and now that little squiggly line disappears because we're actually using it. So let's go ahead and save this, and we'll do a control F5. Let me bring this down, and you'll see that it's outputting Brad Traversy. Press any key to continue. If we hit any key, it's going to just, well, it should just close up. There we go. And if we wanted to, for instance, add some text, like say, let's say hello, so we could just put in double quotes, and then we can concatenate with a plus sign, just like we would in JavaScript. I know a lot of you guys are JavaScript developers, so you can also think of console write or write line as console log. Okay, same type of thing. So if we save that and we run it with control F5 and bring it down, you'll see hello Brad Traversy. All right, we'll close that. Now if we wanted to create an integer, let's say my age, an int is what is the type that we would define for that. Sorry about that dinging. Actually, let me put this on vibrate. All right, so we would say int, and let's call this age, and we'll set it to 35. And then down here, let's actually get rid of the hello, and then we'll say name, and then we'll concatenate onto that, and we'll say is space, and then concatenate age. All right, so if we go ahead and run that, then we get Brad Traversy is 35. Now there is actually a better way to do this, and that would be to say console.writeLine, and then in here we can use placeholders for our dynamic values for our variables. So if we put some curly braces and let's say 0, I'm sorry, these need to be in quotes. So let's say 0, and then we'll just do space is, and then 1. And then we can add a parameter here. We'll put a comma, and then we want to put the name, and then another comma, and the age. All right, so let's go ahead and actually let's comment this out and save it and run it. And if I bring this down, you can see Brad Traversy is 35. So you can use these placeholders, and then whatever you want to fill them with, just put them in here in the correct order. Okay, so for example, if we had another value here, we would just put curly brace and then 2. Okay, so you just want to go from 0 up. All right, so these are actually not part of the application. I just wanted to kind of explain some of that stuff before we begin. So for our application, when we first open it up, I wanted to have kind of a header with the name of the application, the version, and the author's name. So what we'll do is set a couple variables here. So let's say set, we'll say set app vars, and let's say these are all going to be strings. So string, and then we'll say app name, and we need to use double quotes here, and let's call this number guesser, and then we'll do app version, and we're going to set that to 1.0.0, and then let's do app author, and we'll set that to, I'm going to put my name, but you can put yours, it's fine. Everything I do here is totally open source, and you're free to do what you want with it. So now we have the variables. Now let's just do a console.writeLine, and we're going to use those placeholders. So we'll say 0 this is going to be where the app name is, and let's put a colon, and then we'll say version 1, and we'll say by, and then 3. And then we just want to add in here app name, app version, and app author. Alright, so let's see what that looks like. We'll save it and run it. Control F5. And I'm getting an error here. Index 0 base must be greater or equal to 0. What did I do? Oh, I put a 3 there. That should be 2. Alright. So now if I bring this down, we get Number Guesser version 1.0.0 by Brad Traversy. So that's kind of the header, I guess you could call it. So now what I'm going to do is show you how we can actually change the text color in the console, because I want this application intro or header, I want this to have a different color. So what we're going to do is go right above where we did the right line, and let's put a comment in here, and let's say change text color. And to do this, we can say console dot, and then if we look here, these are all the different properties. We want the foreground color. You also have the background color if you want to change that. But let's choose foreground color. And then what we'll do is set that equal to, and then we have to do console color dot, and then you'll see all these different options. So you can choose any of these. We're gonna go with green. All right. So let's save that, and we'll try and run it. And I'm going to bring this down. Now notice that the color has changed to green, but it's not just for this line. It's going to be for anything after that as well. So what we have to do is we need to set it back after we're done with that color. So after we write it out, I want to put a comment basically for every single line of code we write so you guys know exactly what's going on. All right, so let's just say write out app info. And then down here we're going to say console color dot, not console color, we want to do console dot reset color. All right, and that's going to set it back to the default of white. Let's put a comment here, reset text color. So now if we run that, let's bring this down, and now you can see only this line here is green. Okay, it goes back to white after that. So now that we have our application info at the top, we're going to proceed on. Now, before we do the actual game where we need to guess a number, I want it to ask us our name, and we'll put the name in and it'll give us a greeting. Okay, very simple. So let's go down here, and later on we're going to separate all this into separate functions so it's not, you know, all inside of this main function. Makes things a little cleaner. So let's see, where are we? Greet user. All right. So we're going to just, actually let's put a comment here. We'll say ask user's name. So console dot right line. And let's say what, I keep putting single quotes in here. I want to use double. What is your name? All right, and then they're going to answer that, and we're going to put that input into a string. Okay, so let's say string input. Okay, it's just a variable called input, and we're going to set it to console dot read line. Okay, and that's going to put whatever the user enters is going to go into that variable. So after that, what we want to do is just write out basically hello and then their name, and then we'll say let's play a game. So let's do console dot write line, and then in here we'll say hello, put our placeholder, and then we'll say let's play a game. Okay, save that. Let's try it out. Bring this down, and we get our application info here, and then we get what is your name. So I'm going to say Brad, enter. Oops, we need to write our second parameter here, which is going to be whatever they put as input. Okay, whatever they put into the console, and it'll be put inside of input, and we want to replace this placeholder with that input. Let's try it again. Let's close that up. Control F5, bring this down. What is your name? Brad. Hello, Brad. Let's play a game. Good. So that works good. Now we're going to start the game. So first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to set our number. Okay. So let's say set correct number. It's gonna be random, but for now we're gonna actually set it manually. So let's create an int. We'll say int correct number, and we're gonna set that equal to 7 by default. All right, and ignore the squiggly lines here. It's green. That means that it's kind of just a heads up. It's telling us that we haven't used that value anywhere. Now we're also going to set another variable for the guess. So we'll say init guess var. Let's set this to init correct number. So int, and we'll call this guess, and we're going to set it to 0 by default. All right. Then what we want to do is tell the user or ask the user to guess a number. So let's say console.writeLine, and let's say guess a number between 1 and 10. Okay. These should actually be double quotes. So let me see if I can try to explain this. The way that we want this to work is once we put in a number, if it's not correct, we want it to ask us again. So we have to use a loop for this because we want to basically say if the number doesn't match, then we want to loop through and we want to ask again and again until the user actually gets it right. Okay, and you can make it work differently if you want, but that's how this is going to work. Let me just put a comment here. We'll say ask user for number. So we're going to need to use a loop. So we'll say while. We're going to say while guess. Okay, so guess is, remember, it's initially set to 0. So while guess is not equal to the correct number, then we're going to do whatever's in here. All right, let's put a comment here as well. We'll say while guess is not correct. Okay, and then we're going to want to get the user's input. So let's put that in a variable. Now by default it's going to be a string, so we're going to set our variable to a string. Set it to console.readLine. Why is that? What's going on? Cannot be declared in the scope because that name is used in an enclosing local scope. Oh, because I used it up here, right? Okay, so this later on is going to go into its own function, so we can use input then, but for now we want these to be different. So let's change this to input name. That makes a bit more sense too. It's more descriptive. And then we just want to make sure we change it here as well. And then down here, we'll just keep that as input, okay, which is going to be a string because when we get the user's input, it's a string. Now we're going to want to take that input and we're going to want to parse it into an integer and put it into the guess variable, which is initialized up here as 0. All right, so let's do that. Let's say cast to int and put in guess. Put it into the guess variable. So let's do guess, which is already defined as 0, and we're going to set that to input that the user enters, but we need it to be an integer. So for that, we can use a function called int32.parse. Okay, and that'll parse it into an integer. It'll put it into this guess. So now we have the user's guess. So we need to match it to the correct number up here that is 7. So let's do that. So match guess to correct number. So if, all right, we're actually going to say if guess is not equal to the correct number. So if they don't answer 7, then what's going to happen? We're going to want to spit out a message. Oops. Let's spit out a message just like we did up here. And I want to change the color too. So let's copy this, which is changing the color, outputting the message, and then resetting the color back. Later on, we'll put this into a function so that we can reuse it, and we're not repeating ourselves as much. But we're going to change this to red because it's kind of an error message. And then let's change the actual message here. Get rid of all that. And we're going to say wrong number, please try again. So let's save that. Control F5. Let's bring it down and put our name in. Guess a number between 1 and 10. We'll say 1, which we know isn't correct. Wrong number, please try again. 2, and so on. Now if I put 7 and enter, it just ends because we're not doing anything after that. So what we want to do is now go outside of this while loop right here, because now guess is actually going to be equal to the correct number. So that ends, and if you just put the cursor before the curly brace, you'll see where it ends. So you can see the while loop ends right there. So that's where we're going to go. And we're just going to output success message. Okay, so basically, we're basically doing the same thing here. I want to change the color to yellow, so I'm just going to copy that, and we'll just replace that. This needs to be changed. This is going to tell user it's the wrong number. Then down here, we're going to say tell user it's the right number. And I'm going to change it to yellow, not red. So for this, we'll just say you are correct. And then we'll reset the color. So let's try that. Control F5. Okay. Let's give it a shot. Guess a number, 1, wrong number, wrong number. Let's do 7, enter, you are correct. All right, so we are getting there. Now, we have a major issue in our code, and that is, if we go back here, and it asks us for a number, and I put in D and enter, you'll see that we have this error. Input string was not in a correct format. So that's a big issue in our code. So what we need to do is we need to check to make sure that the input the user puts in is actually a number and not a letter or a special character. So we're going to have to go to where we capture that input, which is right here. Okay, so this is where we get the user's input for the number and we put it into input, and then here is where we actually translate it or parse it into an integer. So we need to go in between those two. All right, and let's say make sure it's a number. So to do that, we can put an if statement here. And we're going to use something called try parse. All right, so let's see, where are we here? So we're going to say if not int dot try parse, and if we look at that, it says converts the string representation of a number to its 32-bit signed integer equivalent. All right, so it'll take a string of, let's say, 7 and then turn it into the actual integer 7. And then it says a return value indicates whether the conversion succeeded. Okay, so it'll tell us if it actually, if it succeeds. So if it is in fact a number. So let's do try parse, and then we need to pass into here input, okay, which comes from the user input, and then we're going to say out, and then the guess variable here. All right, and then if it's not a number, then we're going to just print a message. So let's just copy this right here and put that in there. And you can see we're repeating ourselves quite a bit with this. That's why later on we'll put it into a specific function. So we're going to keep it red, and then we need to tell user it's not a number. All right, so we'll say sorry, or no, let's say please enter an actual number. All right, and then we just want to go to the bottom here, and let's say keep going. So we just need to say continue. All right, so let's try that. Okay, what is your name? We'll guess a number that's wrong. Let's now put something that's not a number. We'll say D. Please enter an actual number. So as long as I don't enter a number, it's going to say that. Let's put in 4. It says wrong number. Please try again. 7. You are correct. All right, so now we're making sure that a user has to put in a number. So everything's working, but what I want to do is instead of having a fixed number like 7, I want to generate a random number each time. So let's actually just comment this out. And then we want to create a new random object. So to do that, we can say, let's see, we can do random equals new, and then there's actually a class called random, or an object, that we can set that to. So we have this variable now that we can use that has methods attached to it. So we're going to set our correct number, just like we did up above. Whoops. Not init. I want to say int correct number. And we can now take that random object and we can call dot next. Okay, which just generates a random number, and we can pass in a parameter or 2 parameters here and say that we want it to be from 1 to 10. And that'll give us a random number. You can see how easy and how sleek that is. Let's just put that comment here. All right, so now let's try it out. And now we don't know what the actual answer is. So it's like we're playing the actual game. So let's just start at 1, wrong number, and we'll just go up, and it was 3. All right, so the functionality is just about done, but what I want to do is make it so that when we're done, we can play again, because right now we'll just exit. So to do that, we're going to have to put everything inside of a while loop. All right, so we want to go under where we set the application title and all that. We want to go under the greeting of the user. We want to go right under where it says let's play a game, and let's say while true. And that'll be an ongoing loop. Okay, it's always going to be true. We want to wrap it around everything. So we want to wrap it till right here. Whoops. Okay, and you see it pushes everything over, which is really nice. So now we have this while true, and then all of this stuff is inside of it. Okay, and then it ends here. So at the bottom here, right under this reset color, we're going to ask the user if they want to play again. All right, so we'll say ask to play again. And we're going to just do console.writeLine. And we're going to put in our double quotes, and we'll say play again. And let's put in brackets here y or n. Okay, we want them to put in either y or n for yes or no. All right, and then let's get the answer. So we'll say string, and we'll just call this answer, and we'll set it to the console.readLine. Now, they might not know to make it an uppercase y or n, so we want to just change it to upper no matter what, and we can use a simple function. We can just chain onto this, and we can say to upper, and that'll make it an uppercase. All right, so now we want to check to see if it was either a yes or a no. So let's say if. Okay, this is going to actually be an if else. Okay, so let's say if answer is equal to uppercase Y. Actually, let's put this on a different line too. And then if yes, all we need to do here is do a continue. Okay, and then if else, then we want to return outside of the loop. Actually, you know what? We don't want to do else. Let's not do an else. Let's do... actually, you know what? Yeah, let's do an else, but we want to do an else if because we need to check for the answer if it's no. So let's say else if... And here, let's say if answer is equal to n. And then we're going to return. All right, so it'll only continue if they answer Y. So I think that's it. Yeah, let's go ahead and try that. All right, let me bring this down. Let's say guess a number. Just going to start from 1 and go up. You are correct. Play again. Let's say yes. Guess a number. 5. Okay, let's say no. Enter. And there we go. It ends. Good. So our application is done as far as functionality. Now, we want to clean this up a little bit because we're repeating ourselves quite a bit. Also, things like where we did the application intro, I want to put that into its own function. So let's go underneath the main function here. If we put the cursor right here at the beginning of the curly brace and go down, you'll see where it ends. Okay, so that ends there. So now let's create a function to get the app info. So we'll say static void get app info. Actually, I want to start this with an uppercase. We're using Pascal case. Okay, and then what we'll do is grab these variables. We're also going to grab the foreground color, the right line, and the reset color. And we're going to cut all of that. And then in its place, we're going to say get app info. And we can put a little comment here if we want. We'll say run get app info function to get info. I don't know, just writing whatever. And then down here, we'll paste that functionality in. So let's save it and make sure everything still works, even though we added that function. Okay, so it's set. You can see it's putting out the info, that's the part of the program where we put into that function. Everything else should work. Good. And then I also want to put the greeting into its own function. So where we ask the name, we get the input, and we say, hello, let's play the game. We're going to cut that stuff out as well. And then let's say, we'll call it greet user. And we'll say ask for user's name and greet. Okay, there's an error here because it doesn't know what that is yet, so we need to go down and create that. Let's go right under the get app info function, and we'll say static void greet user. And let's go ahead and paste that in. All right, and we should probably put comments here as well. We'll say get and display app info. And then this one here will ask user's name and greet. Okay, so that looks a little cleaner. Now what we'll do is let's create a function to basically print to the screen with a color. So we're doing this in a lot of different places. If we start up at the top here and we go down, and let's see, right here. So this part where we're telling the user to use an actual number if they didn't enter a number. So we'll grab the foreground color, the right line, and the reset color. And we're going to cut that out. And then let's go down here. and let's say print color message, and then we'll call this print, actually we need to do static void print color, or print color message. Okay, we'll paste that in. Now this function is actually going to take some parameters. It's going to need the color and it's going to need the message, because those are always going to be different. So right here we need to define the arguments. Now the first one is going to be the color, but it's actually going to be the console color, so we need to define it as that. So console color and then color. Alright, and then for the message, that's just going to be a regular string. Okay, and then we're going to just replace this with color, which comes in through the first argument, and then replace this with the message, like that. So then we can go back up to where we took this from, which is right here, and let's say print, I guess print error message, and we can say print color message. And then remember, the first parameter has to be a console color, so we'll say console dot, not dot, just console color dot, and then whatever color we want. In this case it's going to be red. Okay, and then you can see it has a red squiggly line before we put that comma in, because it takes in 2 parameters but we only have 1. Okay, you can see it gives us some pretty good descriptive information about what this takes in. So console color red, and then the message was, what was it? Please use an actual number. So now whenever we want to print out a color message, we can just do this, which is much cleaner. So let's copy this. Actually, we'll just copy that. And then let's see where else we can plug this in. So we're also doing it here when we check to see if it's the correct number. If it's not, then we're setting the color to red. We're printing out this message and we're resetting the color. So let's just paste this in. And then we want it to be red, so we'll leave that. But then we want this message. So we'll just paste that in, and then we can get rid of these lines. Okay, so it really tightens up the code. And I guess we'll just say set error message, or print error message. I know these comments aren't the best, but I'm just trying to be descriptive. So let's see, where else can we do this? We can do it right here. We're saying you are correct. The color's yellow, you are correct, and then reset. So let's go ahead and just replace all that. Copy this, and we'll replace that. And this is going to be actually a success message. So this is going to be console color yellow. And then we'll say correct. You guessed it. And I think that's it. So let's save it and make sure everything works. Okay, what is your name? Here's a number, wrong number, please try again. Let's put something else in that's not a number. We'll put a character in. Good. And now we'll keep guessing numbers. 9 is correct. Do I want to play again? We'll say yes. Guess a number. Correct. Let's say no. And we exit. Good. So we now have a working C# application. Now if you want to get your actual file, your executable, we can go to the Documents folder. Mine is actually my Dropbox. And then if I go to Visual Studio 2017 and go to Projects, we have our number guesser folder. This includes everything, all the configs, all the properties, everything. But if we go to the bin and then debug, you'll see number guesser exe. This is our application. Just make sure that it says type application. And you can take this and you can give it to anybody. I'm just going to copy it and put it right on my desktop. And let's go ahead and run it. And I'm going to bring it down here. and you'll see it has the application info that we output. Put our name. We'll guess let's guess something that's not a number, and then we'll start guessing numbers. And correct. If we say yes, we want to play again. Correct. If we say no, enter, it's going to exit. All right, so we've created a Windows console application. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and hopefully it wasn't too confusing. I know it was a little more difficult than doing like your standard hello world, but I wanted to create something that was actually a little bit cool. So that's it, guys. I do plan on having more C# videos and more higher level language videos in the future, so hopefully you like this kind of thing. And that's it. Thanks for watching.